For 11.4, okay, what we're doing for 11.4 is actually not at all related to binomial expansion. Okay, it's just kind of an extra concept that we have to learn, and so it's put in here with binomial expansion, the binomial expansion unit. Okay, so we're going to work on finding mean, variance, and standard deviation. Okay, these are all things that you would want to find. If you take statistics or probability, you will probably have to do a lot of this. Okay, so just FYI. Mean. Does anyone know what is the mean of something? Okay, it's not required to know, but I want you to make sure that you know the difference between mean, and then there's another word called median that you see a lot, and mode. Okay, mean is what we're going to deal with, and the mean is the average of the data. Okay, the average of the data. Just as a side note, does anyone know what median means? Median is the middle number. Okay, kind of like the median in the road. It's the middle of the road. And what's the mode? The mode is the number that occurs the most. Okay? Okay, so mode is the one that occurs the most. So, for mean, the average of the data. The next thing we need to know is variance. And variance is technically how spread out the data is. Okay, how spread out the data is. There are some steps to finding variance, so we need to make sure we write those down. Okay, the steps to finding variance are as follows. First thing you do, step 1, is to find the mean. And remember, the mean is the average. Step 2 in finding variance is for each piece of data, subtract data and the mean. For each piece of data, subtract the data and the mean. Step 3 is to square each difference. Square each difference from step 2. And the last step, step 4, is to find the average of the squares from step 3. Okay, this is something that you have to memorize these steps. I am not going to have them on the poster for you. Okay, these will not be up for you. You will have to memorize them. So, for example number 1, like I said, there's only going to be 3 examples today. So, for example number 1, I'd like you to find the variance. Find the variance of 4, 7, 3, and 2. Find the variance of 4, 7, 3, and 2. So we'll start with step 1. Okay, step 1 is to find the mean. Okay, and the mean is the average. So you add all these together. So 4 plus 7 plus 3 plus 2 divided by what? How do we find the average? Divided by however many you added up. So divided by 4. You add these together. 4 plus 7 plus 3 plus 2 gives you 16. Divided by 4. So my mean is equal to what? My average is 4. Okay, so this is actually the mean. We're not asking for that. So unfortunately, if you're finding a lot of these problems, you have to find the mean before you can find the variance. You have to find the variance before you can find the standard deviation. So there's a steps. You just have to do it that way. There's nothing you can do about it. Okay, they have to be done in that order. Then step 2, and you will not have to label all your steps on everything. Okay, step 2 is to take each score or each piece of data and subtract the mean from it. So we're going to take all these data, so 4, 7, 3, and 2, say these are scores, and subtract the mean from each one. So 4 is the mean for your data. Then we're going to find those differences. So 4 minus 4 is 0. 7 minus 4 is 3. 3 minus 4 is negative 1. 2 minus 4 is negative 2. Step 3 is to square those values. So take each value and square it. So 0 squared is equal to 0. 3 squared is 9. What's negative 1 squared? Positive 1. And negative 2 squared is 4. Those negatives always go away. Okay? Then those squared values, okay, step 4 is to take all of those values and find their average. So we're going to add all of these up together. So 0 plus 9 plus 1 plus 4. And how do we find the average of those values? Add them together and divide by what? 4. By 4. So if you add all of these together, we get 14 divided by 4. 14 divided by 4 is equal to what? 3.5, or 7 over 2, 3.5. And this is what's called our variance. Okay, so your variance is equal to 3.5. That is the answer for this initial question. Okay, unfortunately, you do have to do all of these steps before you can get your answers.
Does it have to be decimal?
You can use a variance. What says variance? Does it have to be in decimal? You can use calculators for this, so yes. And the reason you're going to want to use calculators is we're going to see in our next problem, I'm going to ask for standard deviation, and you have to find the square root of something. So the square root of a fraction is a little bit too difficult, so you do want to leave it in decimals. Okay? Need a minute still?
Yeah, because I can't see the bottom one.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, next thing we're going to go over is called standard deviation. Okay, standard deviation. Oops, sorry, throwing things at you guys. And standard deviation is equal to the average distance. Standard deviation, the definition of standard deviation is the average distance from the mean. Average distance from the mean. Okay, the formula to find standard deviation is equal to the square root of the variance. Okay, you need to memorize that. Standard deviation is equal to the square root of the variance. So for example number 2, this time I would like you to find the standard deviation of the values 4, 7, 3, and 2. I want you to find standard deviation of the values 4, 7, 3, and 2. Do these look a little familiar?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so you can look back and from example 1, we get that the variance is equal to what? 3.5. So the standard deviation would be what? The square root of 3.5. Okay? You can do that on your calculator and you would get 1.87. Okay, square root of 3.5 is equal to 1.87. That is your answer. So you will need a calculator on this test. We don't have to have it, but I strongly recommend that you have a calculator to get your right answers. Okay, then the last one for today, example number 3. I would like you, or if I tell you that we work, we're going to say we work at a doggy daycare, okay? And if you measure the height, we're going to measure the height of your dogs. Okay, if you measure the height of your dogs and get that your dogs are 32 inches tall, 43 inches, which is a very tall dog, 30 inches, and 15 inches. Okay, measure the height of your dogs and we get 32, 43, 30, and 15 inches. I would like you to find the mean, variance, and standard deviation. Okay, I want you to find the mean, variance, and standard deviation. Now remember, you have to find the mean before you can find the variance. You have to find the variance before you can find the standard deviation. So these are asked pretty much in order. So how do we find the mean of something? Mean is the average, right? So you're just going to add them all up. 32 plus 43 plus 30 plus 15 and divide by what? By 4. You add all those together, you should get 120. And 120 divided by 4 gives you an answer of what? 30. So your mean is equal to 30. Now, the next step is to find variance. It's not always going to be 4. It just happens that the 2 examples I've given you, there was 4 parts of data.
Oh, okay, so it's
However many things you add together, right? Right. So the variance, we're going to take the height of each dog and we're going to subtract the mean. So if you had a height of 32, 43, 30, and 15, we're going to subtract from that the mean. The mean was 30. So minus 30 for each one of these. Okay, so your next step, 32 minus 30 is 2. 43 minus 30 is 13. 30 minus 30 is 0. It just happens that in these examples, both of the examples we had a 0 there. You're not always going to get one of your data things to be 0. Okay, it's not always going to work that way. And then 15 minus 30 gives you a negative 15. Then you need to square each of those values. So 2 squared gives us 4. 13 squared is what? 169. 0 squared gives you what? 0. Okay, remember, anything to the 0 power equals 1. But 0 to any other power is still 0. Okay? Negative 15 squared is what? 225. Okay, if we add all of those up, okay, add all those together, what does that give you? 398. And to find the variance, we have to find the average of those. So what would I divide by?
4.
By 4. So that means that your variance will equal what? 99.5, right? And then finally, how do we find standard deviation? We take the square root of that, right? So the square root of 99.5 will equal what? 9.97. Usually, we're going to tell you to round to the tenths place. So if you rounded that to the tenths, what would that be equal to? It's approximately 10, right? You would round up. Okay? So usually, in your instructions on your homework, we'll tell you how many decimal places to round to. But it's usually going to be 1 decimal place. Okay? Homework on this is going to be worksheet 4. You are doing numbers 1 through 15. Okay? Worksheet 4, numbers 1 through 15. And that's it.